Welcome back to Recruiter.com. Let's continue with date and time formulas by putting them into real-life examples. On this first date and time example, we're going to go over this HR timesheet that I've set up. And up here at the top, you can see in the header, it has the starting and finishing period. So it's going from January 11th through the 22nd. That's all this data below. And it gives a summary of how many working days there are in this period below. There's 9. And then the last work day here is January 29th. And so we're going to go over these two formulas and how I created them based on the formulas that we just learned. Then next, we'll go into this spreadsheet, and you can see each day the respective employee comes in and says that they came in on the 11th, logged in at 7:40, and then they left at 6 p.m. And all the employees do that for the same day. And then it goes to the next day and does the same thing over again. We're going to go ahead and add 4 more columns and then use the formulas that we just learned to fill in these 4 columns. So let's start up here with the net working days. And let's first delete the answer, and then let's begin typing this formula. So we can say equals net working days. And again, like I was saying in the previous video, you get 2 options. The international version just gives you more options. It gives you both the weekend and the holiday. This is a pretty simple formula where we just need to plug in the start date, which would be here, the period start date, and then go to the period end date, and then comma, and then specify how our weekend structure is set up. I'm just going to use the typical Saturday and Sunday as our days off, so that will not be a work day. And so I'm going to put a 1, comma, holidays. I've actually made a holidays tab over here, so I'm going to navigate over to the holidays tab, and I put in a few common US holidays. And so I'm just going to reference these holidays, and notice that I have it in a table, so my formula actually changed to holiday and then bracket date. So it's basically saying this table, I renamed it as holiday and then take the date field. So that's why it's referencing it like that. Since that was the last argument, I can just close it up and hit enter. And you can see quickly that it returns 9 work days are between the 11th and the 22nd. We can verify this 9 by just going ahead and using our text formula and referencing this value and saying, tell me what day it is, day of the week. So we can get a Monday. I'm just going to copy this formula down and it'll reference the next cell here. So it says it's going between a Monday and a Friday, and it's definitely not 1 week because this is more than 10 days apart. It looks like it's 11 days apart. So that tells me it's 2 weeks, the first week starting on Monday, and obviously 1 work week with Saturday and Sunday being non-work days. That would mean that's just 5. And then again, going through the next work week through Friday would be 5 as well. So this is 10 together. So why 9? And the reason is because on the holidays, we have MLK Day on January 18th, which would not be a work day, which is why we have 9 here. So for this next example here, we have the last work day, and we're actually talking the last work day of the month that we're trying to find. So this is, like the note says, it's assuming a Monday through Friday work schedule. That way, it can't be just the last day of the month, where the last day obviously in January would be the 31st of the month. But we want the last work day, so we had to back up to Friday the 29th. And I think Sunday the 31st was the last day of the month. So let's take a look at this formula that we're going to be writing. It's actually really, really big. It has a lot of the formulas that we just went over and some of them that are in other sections. We have if and or, which are both logical formulas, and we have weekday, end of month, weekday again, end of month, and basically weekday and end of month rotating through here multiple times. So let's just hit enter and return it, and then let's delete it and start writing it. Now let's first start by getting really close to the answer, which would be the end of month. So we can use the EO month formula and just reference the start date of this HR timesheet. And then we're just going to put 0 for the months because we don't want to go forward or back any months. We want to stay within January. And it says that Sunday, January 31st is the last day of the month. So we see Sunday there. Now we want to get it back to the work days. So really it's going to be Friday, but I want this formula to be dynamic that when I'm not in January, that it still is going to work for February through December. So the next thing that triggers in my head to go ahead and start using is that weekday formula that we learned and use and reference this serial number and put a comma for the return type. So I want to return it when it's a Saturday or a Sunday as a 1 or a 2. And I'll explain later why. So I'm going to grab 16 and hit enter. So it returns 2 because I said starting on Saturday for 1, going through Friday as 7. So therefore, if it's a Saturday date, it's going to be a 1. If it's a Sunday date, this will be a 2. The next thing I need to do is check if this is either a 1 or a 2. And so I can do that with a logic formula or. So I'm trying to figure out, hey, if it's a 1 or a 2, then we got to do something with it. So that's my logic here. It's 1 or, it's either or, it doesn't have to be both. I'm going to say this value here, if that's equal to a 1, or if this value is equal to a 2, and then close it up. So this statement should return true, obviously because it's 2. Then I need to use this true statement and add it to my logic test right here. So I have my logic test. I'm going to check if this is true or false. So I'm going to just select this as my logic test. And so if that is true, that means I'm on a Saturday or a Sunday. So if it is true, then I want to take this value that we found for the end of month, and then I want to subtract the days of the week. So I'm subtracting 2 from Sunday, which would get me back Saturday, Friday. So it would land on Friday. And then if it was Saturday, it would say 1. So then it would say, this would be Saturday, and I'd say subtract 1, which would get me back to Friday. That's why back in this formula, actually, let's take a peek. Let me just put a comment there. That's why in this formula, in weekdays, I chose my return type as 16 in here so that I could have it either return a 1 or a 2 for Saturday and Sunday, because it's going to perfectly work to put some math to it. So let's pop back in here. Let's get rid of that apostrophe and continue writing. So if it's true statement, I just want to subtract that value. If it's false, that means this value did not land on a weekend, and this value over here was not a 1 or 2, indicating that it was a weekend, Saturday or Sunday. So it can stay on the date that it is. So I'm going to close it up. And let's just quickly go ahead and just copy this. So format painter and paste it over here. So this brings us to Friday. Now, just like I do in all of my formulas, I always step it out like I just did. So I did this formula, which was end of month. This formula, which is calculating the weekdays. Which weekday is it? And it calculated a 2 for Sunday. Then I put in some logic to check if this value was a 1 or a 2. And yes, it is. Then I put an if statement up above, some more logic, and ran it against figuring out, am I on a weekend or not? So if I'm on a weekend, which is true, which is here, so if it is a weekend, go ahead and do this piece of the formula, this value, if it's true, take the weekend less the days, that'll back me back up to the last work day, which was Friday. Otherwise, if we're not on a weekend, it must be a work day, so just return whatever the end of the month is. Now let's go ahead and combine everything together. So let's start over here with this formula, and it shows that we're referencing this cell. So let's pop in here. Let's grab end of month and replace it and paste it in there. And then come into this formula, F2, and it's referencing F7. So I'm going to grab this whole formula. I'm just holding shift and hitting home to grab that whole formula, and then continuing to hold shift and then backing it up 1 with my arrow keys here. I'm gonna hit enter, come back in, hit home. I'm just holding control and jumping around with my arrow keys to replace this real quick, and holding shift to select the entire range and using my arrow keys and replacing those. Then coming back in here, so it looks like we're taking G7, so it's right below here. So I'm gonna grab this one, hold shift, home, back up 1, control C to copy, and let's paste it into G7, paste that there. Now we're all the way to the right over here. This is a big formula. So E7 is here. So let me hop in here, grab that, and replace it in a couple spots. So E7, V, and then E7 there. And then last one is F7. We'll come and grab here, copy it, and then come up here and put it in F7, V, enter. All of these formulas are no longer needed. Let's come up here, and I'm going to cut this one, and I'm going to paste it here.